It's time for Should Christians Watch? A nun, a professor, and a TV writer discuss television from a Christian perspective. Today's discussion: Sweet Magnolias and Fleabag. And then two recommendations. And our first ever unrecommendation. Disrecommendation? Whatever, don't watch it. So let's ask the question.
Should Christians watch?
Sweet Magnolias is topping #1 on the Netflix charts. It's a lighthearted series based on the books by Cheryl Woods that follows the lives of 3 middle-aged women from Serenity, South Carolina, who have been friends since childhood. We see their ups and downs of life, family, and relationships as they seek to build a dream spa business in an old Southern historical building. It's a feel-good story, like Gilmore Girls, that reflects on the healing power of friendship, encouragement, and support, something all women appreciate. You know, women have a lot of drama in their lives, and they often don't need any more. So this show appeals to them. It's comfort TV, and I like it.
So I ran a show for Hallmark called Good Witch. And so obviously I am the voice of middle-aged women in America. So I know this kind of show, and there's a certain part of me that just wants to say that old saying, you know, if you like this sort of thing, you will like this sort of thing. It is well done. Full disclosure, it's written and showrun by a friend of mine, a writer who I've worked with and worked for, Cheryl Anderson, who is a Christian. And one of the things she's done is she has represented faith in this show. I like that. One of my criticisms of it, and I see this in a lot of shows, is, at least in the first episode, they go to church, but you don't really know that they're Christian until you see them in church. And so I kind of long for shows where, you know, they sit around drinking margaritas and stuff. That's great. But I'd love to see them talking about God while they're drinking margaritas, which is one thing I think a lot of Christians do.
Amen.
But you generally know this is a warm, cozy place. Netflix describes it as cozy, and I think that's a good word for it.
I think there's real value in being able to engage with a show like this in a way that's uplifting, that maybe gives you some respite from your day-to-day grinds, especially in the world we're living in now, where so many of us are encountering on the ground some really harsh realities. Sometimes TV is great for that, to give us a little break.
There are moments for a margarita night, so...
Amen.
Yeah, it's comfort food. I think the challenge is to say, could one of these comfort food cozy shows ever rise to that level of, you know, Emmy-worthy writing, performance, directing, that kind of stuff? How do you make goodness and community more appealing? The challenge that even I had running a show like this, where I used to get notes from the network saying things like, there's too much conflict in this scene. You know, our audience is basically women who are folding laundry. How do you rise above that qualitatively? Can you get, you know, witty dialogue and depth of character? And even though you know things are going to work out because there is a community of people there for you, can you make these shows watchable by a larger group of people? That was the challenge I had. I know it's the challenge that this showrunner has, that even Netflix might be putting some demands on of what we want here. But I also want to mention, by the way, that there's a lot of teenagers on this show. That's a good thing. I don't think you see a lot of that on TV. It's one of the reasons I would hope Christians might engage with this show, even as a family.
Yes, that's actually a really important part, Dean. The teenagers in this show really communicate with their parents, which you don't see in too many shows. And even when they try to, you know, steer away, you know, and try to hide something, it always comes out and they end up having a really good conversation.
Cut those into wedges, okay? Annie, did you hear me? Hello?
What happens to me if something happens to you?
Well, nothing's gonna happen to me.
That's what the Calhoun's thought. I know that bad things happen, sweetheart, and I think the important thing to remember is that you can't let fear take the joy out of life. And no matter what, you have people a whole bunch of people to love you, protect you, and see you through everything you're gonna do. Okay? And 2 of those people are gonna be here in just a minute. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, watch it. Take that out for me.
Parents can talk to their teens. It's not impossible. So,
As a parent of 3 daughters who are all about to be teenagers the next few years, that's very encouraging to know.
Yes.
We'll start to rename our show Should Cutter's Family Watch?
This segment contains spoilers.
Fleabag is a Amazon original that was created, written, and stars Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is actually the darling of Hollywood now, having won a number of Emmys for this show. Fleabag is a show that depicts a character who is actually struggling from the trauma that came from tragically and violently losing one of her best friends. And she pretty clearly goes through some self-destructive behaviors. I should make a qualification that this show is certainly not for everyone. However, for those who it is for, I want to say that I think it is actually worth your time. What's interesting about this show is that it is at times funny, at times witty, at times poignant. It is profane. It is sacrilegious. It might even be blasphemous. And yet, at the end of season 2, it had me in tears with what I saw was nothing other than a full-throated endorsement for a priestly vocation, an actual sacred vocation that the show may not actually understand fully. It may not even agree with or support. And yet from this really unlikely messenger, a show called Fleabag, we get what I thought was a really sincere and honest advocacy for the role of a sacred vocation like the priesthood.
Bless my soul, that's the way it is.
Amen.
So yes, in the season 2, she falls for a priest. She meets a priest that's going to be marrying her. The priest is going to be marrying her father to his fiance.
I can't go to hell for that, can I, Father?
No, not as long as you confess.
Oh, God, he's their priest.
Then you've nothing to worry about.
Their cool, sweary priest.
And so she falls for this priest, but in some way she kind of eggs him on and makes it a conquest of hers that he will have sex with her. And the interesting thing is that in the end, the priest does fall. He recognizes his failing, and he walks away from the relationship. And it's sad because this whole story is really, her voyeurism is a means of filling a dark hole of loneliness and pain in her soul. And she seeks that filling of that dark hole in all the wrong ways and in all the wrong reason, for all the wrong reasons. But when she falls for this priest, she's actually starting to see that there is something more to relationships. And unfortunately, it's not with him, but the part I really have a problem with is that in the representation of the priest, for most of it, okay, priests, we are all human beings and we're all sinners. However, when he pushes her and forces her into a confession box, when she's not even Catholic and she doesn't even want to confess, I have a real problem with that. That's a real abuse of the sacrament. It is not what would happen.
But he sucks as a priest. So for this priest to do it, I found within character because he's horrible and also he's a sexual predator. But aside from that, yeah, a good priest would not do this. And that's my problem with this show. I couldn't disagree more with Cutter that at the end, it's a positive representation of a vocational life. I want to go back to a couple things. Cutter mentioned is profane, blasphemous, sacrilegious, maybe even. It is profane from word one. The first 5 minutes of season 1 is Phoebe Waller-Bridge doing a monologue about a specific sex act. You can get past that, you can figure out the rest of the series. So I had a lot of people telling me, hey, there's this Christian character on. He's played by the actor who played Moriarty in Sherlock on PBS. And he essentially manipulates her into this sexual relationship. And there's an amazing scene, some of the best writing I've seen all year, where she sits in the confessional and she cries out about what she wants and what she's looking for and what she's hoping for. And she's basically saying, I need a savior.
I know exactly what I want right now.
What's that?
It's bad.
It's okay.
I want someone to tell me what to wear in the morning.
Okay, well, I think there are people who can...
No, I want someone to tell me what to wear every morning. I want someone to tell me what to eat, what to like, what to hate, what to rage about, what to listen to, what band to like, what to buy tickets for, what to joke about, what not to joke about. I want someone to tell me what to believe in, who to vote for, and who to love, and how to tell them. I just think I want someone to tell me how to live my life, Father, because so far I think I've been getting it wrong. But I know that's why people want people like you in their lives, because you just tell them how to do it. You just tell them what to do and what they'll get out at the end of it, even though I don't believe your bullshit. And I know that scientifically nothing that I do makes any difference in the end anyway. I'm still scared. Why am I still scared? So just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do, Father.
And then the priest comes to the confessional door and rips that speech away, and the next thing they're doing is having sex. But in the series, she's also talking to God. She's talking to the camera. The priest hears her. So you kind of get the idea that maybe she's talking to God. At one point when they're in bed, she moves the camera away to imply that she doesn't want this thing looking at her. So there's a lot of depth here. But the representation in the end is just so negative of this Christian character that I just don't see any value in it because of what's ripped away in that moment.
Yeah, see, that's where I think you're wrong, Dean. I think you're over-interpreting it in one direction. I went back and I rewatched it because when you first said that to me, I was like, wow, I must have missed it, or I was seeing a totally different show than you. And in fact, Sister Nancy is right that he does coerce her or convince her to go into the confessional when she doesn't want to. And I actually think that was an overestimation of his ability to win her towards spirituality. She is.
I think it's sexually predatory what he's doing in that moment,
and that's what I'm saying. I don't think because he actually in that scene they do not have sex. He comes and he opens the confessional door and he actually walks away there. You can see from the way it's shot, the way that he's responds to it, that he is deeply disappointed in what he's done. He's sad, he's embarrassed, whatever it is, and he walks away. That episode ends with nothing happening and her staring in the camera, realizing that she has not quite succeeded in what she's wanting to do. And then later it comes back that they do, in fact, have sex. Now, what I think is interesting about that and why I find it a good depiction of a good but flawed priest is that every person, and this is just me speaking from pastoral experience, is thrust into relationships when you are the spiritual leader for someone, where you do have to develop some intimacy, and you have people with all of their various complexities, and it can be very dangerous. It's very risky. And Nancy's point is very important because he doesn't follow best practices, and he relies on his own sort of willpower.
And it's bad writing, and it's bad storytelling. And we Christians, we always want to embrace these Christian but flawed characters. Christian but flawed. How about Christian but noble? How about Christian but holy? How about Christian but strong? How about Christians who utilize their faith in a positive way? I feel like sometimes we Christians are so desperate to see representations of ourselves on screen that we'll embrace anything that's just sort of thrown at us and say, well, he's flawed, we're all sinful. Yeah, how do you show holiness good? How do you show positive relationships well? How do you show a good priest with conflict, but positively? This show doesn't do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a different point. I think you're right. That's great. We should have those examples as well. But this priest, just because there aren't those other ones, doesn't make this priest a bad priest.
Yeah, but name one of those other ones from another show. This is the challenge. Can we name them? It's the real challenge.
I agree with you there. We need to talk about the faithful depictions of Christians and it's perfect. But that doesn't, to me, mean that when we're just watching this show and this priest, that this priest now is a sexual predator who's an awful priest.
I agree, but with both of you in different ways. And Cutter,
No,
I do
you have
agree.
to choose sides, Sister Nancy. You have to choose sides.
Because, well, I do agree with you, Cutter, in that there is that representation of a flawed priest trying to then be faithful to what he is about. And we all need reconciliation. We all need forgiveness for all our sins, you know. But I do have a real problem with that confessional scene. It just really makes it look like all priests are predators, and they are not. Yeah. And that's problematic for me in what it did with the sacrament. It was an abuse of the scene, and to me it felt out of place. And so I do agree with Dean in the sense that then it's making us see, well, yeah, we need some good representation of holy people. I agree, totally. However, Fleabag is the character who elicits compassion in some ways. I mean, at first, the whole first season, I was like, this woman is crazy. Yeah. But at the same time, by the second season, I actually started feeling sorry for her, that she is so desperate that for anything, and it's not sex that's going to fulfill her. I mean, and that's such an interesting message to the culture today. Sex isn't going to fulfill you, and she kind of makes it clear here.
This is a great example of the value of this show, which I go back and forth on, because the value is in understanding that character. Because when she gives that speech, it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. You're seeing a woman crying out and wanting God, and you just think that if the right person walked in at that moment, that person could have come to know Jesus, and she doesn't. So there is value in understanding that this is a certain segment of our culture, a certain kind of person, and how would you as a Christian have responded to this person if she had come into your life? So I want to talk about a show that I really wanted to recommend, but it ends up being a non-recommendation. It's the show Upload, which is on Amazon. It's created by Greg Daniels, who co-created The Office. It's about a world in the future where you can upload your mind into an eternity and live forever. It's the kind of stuff that you'd think we who are wondering should Christians watch would really enjoy. It's got some of the themes going on in The Good Place. And I just didn't think it worked at all. First of all, I didn't think it was funny. In the first episode, it tries to do kind of Futurama kind of jokes, and I think they just fall flat. But second of all, it just doesn't go deep enough into this world, this idea of if we could live together, would we? Would we want to? Should we? How would we do it? Who would we take? You know, what characters, what friends would we take with us? The characters in the show aren't very likable. They're all kind of self-centered and shallow. There's one moment that kind of hints at depth where one of the characters' dads doesn't want to upload because he's got this old-fashioned belief that he wants to die and go to heaven where his wife is. And as the series goes on, this character tries to continue to convince her dad to upload, but he stays firm kind of to his belief, but he's presented as old-fashioned. To me, that's where the conflict, the really interest could be. But essentially, I just don't find the show funny enough, and I don't recommend it at all.
I'm going to recommend a show that does what I think Upload tried to do, and that is Devs. It is a recently released show that was a partnership between FX, and you can find it on Hulu. And it was written by Alex Garland, who's written a bunch of other movies, a lot of horror and sci-fi and suspense. But, importantly, it stars Nick Offerman, which allows me to do 1 degree of separation from Amy Poehler once again. Devs is a really interesting science fiction show, so if you're into science fiction, you would probably like it. But it all hinges upon this sort of secretive tech company that's doing this special operation called Devs. And really what the show engages is the question of big data, artificial intelligence, and what I would describe as a religious vision for the future that doesn't realize it's religious. The coming world of technology is one that is really driven by a sort of utopian vision of human life that sort of merges with machine life. And what's so interesting to me about that is that I think it is a profoundly Christian vision without acknowledging that actually it is a Christian vision. And so if you're interested in seeing how the connection between science and technology and sci-fi and a faith that doesn't realize it's a faith come together, then I'd recommend Devs on Hulu.
For a good representation of a priest in a show, I recommend Father Brown, a BBC TV series loosely based on the character created by G.K. Chesterton. It's about a Roman Catholic parish priest in the 1950s in a small village in England who uses his own wits and talents of his confreres to solve murder mysteries, to the consternation of the local police investigator, who always arrests the wrong person. But Father Brown seeks the truth in a very pastoral way, and so that justice is served. He often also holds to the seal of confession in certain circumstances where he is asked to share, what a confessee has said in the sacrament. I recommend Father Brown as a good representation of a priest in a show. Until next time, I'm the nun, Sister Nancy Usselman.
I'm the professor, Dr. Cutter Calloway.
And I'm the TV writer, Phoebe Waller-Dean Batali.
Should Christians